Welcome to the Agile Book Club. Here are your hosts, Justina and Paul.
So this is the Agile Book Club, a podcast about reading books about agile topics. And I'm Paul, and I'm here with Justina. And
I promise to talk more today.
Yes. That's conditional. That's absolutely conditional. You only get to talk more today if I talk less.
Okay.
This is a zero-sum game, so I'll try not to monopolize the conversation. So do you want? Here you go. You introduce the book. What are we reading today?
Okay. Today we are going to review Making Work Visible by Dominica DeGrandis. And I would call this book as a self-help book. That was actually for me. That it's a perfect idea to read for everyone who at least once in their life woke up at 4 p.m. and thought, oh my God, I have done. Or look at their to-do list for this day and thought, oops, my boss won't be happy because out of this big list, only 2 things are done. Or if by any chance, when someone asks you, Paul, would you like to grab a cup of coffee?
Love to.
No, you screw my phone. You will say, no, I can't, I'm too busy. Yes, so when could we have a cup of coffee? And it's maybe next week or next month because there's so many things and I'm late. So if you ever found yourself in this position, I think that you should read this book to make your life better, make your work environment nicer to be around.
Make yourself nicer to be around.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So you just launched straight into the elevator pitch, so I can give mine as well.
That was not the point. I'm sorry. Too early in the morning.
So yeah, I agree with you. I'm a little bit disappointed in the fact that I agree with you. But
that's nice things to say at the beginning.
Oh, but no, it's not that. It's that I enjoyed the book very much, and we'll get into this a little bit later. But I think that indeed anybody who is interested in learning how to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the way in which a group of people work together, specifically, now it's not in the title. It's hardly in the book, but this is a book about how to do Kanban at the team level. I mean, that's what it is. All of the Kanban rules and principles and practices are in there. They're all laid out in an implementation order, which is very similar, almost exactly the same as the systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban. So it's really a how to introduce Kanban into your organization book in disguise. But I'll get into that a little later too. So if someone came to me and they said, I'm interested in introducing Kanban to my team, that would be for me the perfect person to recommend this book to, because this book is a great way, regardless of why you want to introduce Kanban, but especially if you think that Kanban would help you because you're constantly dealing with interruptions, you don't have clarity into your work and what your priorities are, or you're dealing with lots of dependencies, and so you're constantly waiting on stalled work or work that has to be done by somebody else or can't be done because the right person isn't here or what have you. If those sorts of things are causing you to think, maybe our team should consider using Kanban, then this is exactly the book that I would recommend to you. Because it's really a step-by-step guide to introducing Kanban at the team level. It's not only that. There's more to this book than that. But overwhelmingly, I think the book is about introducing Kanban at the team level. Why you do it and how you should do it.
I agree with you, but I would say thanks to the introduction that was a kind of a picture of overwhelmed people and the culture of being busy, I think it got me into the thinking that she's just smuggling those, Kanban lessons and visualization in some kind of the personal perspective of the people, that she just shows that it will make your life better, your team happier, and your organization more effective and deliver on time. So I really appreciate those psychological points that she also make in the book to make people change their work environment.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I also it seems kind of sneaky. When I'm introducing the concept of Kanban, I've got different ways of introducing it. If I want to mess with people's heads, I say that Kanban is a way of balancing capacity and demand, just to get them thinking. And she's doing something similar to that. She's addressing Kanban as a solution to perceived inefficiency and frustration. So if your workplace is frustrating, or you feel like the ways in which you're working are inefficient, she first goes on to say, well, these are some kinds of inefficiencies that you might see. And she refers to them as time thieves. So
yes.
the introduction to this book is about the first section of this book is about 5 specific things that the author refers to as time thieves, and these are things that steal your time individually, or your company's time, or your team's time, and they're all pretty recognizable. I mean, anybody who's worked in an organization trying to get knowledge work done will recognize all of these, right? No?
Yes and no. Actually, I really liked, that was my first takeaway, that she named them, that she structured them, because I think that it gives you self-confidence when you have the conversation, that you can discover actually how your workflow looks like, how many percent you dedicate for unplanned work and everything. It gives you the confidence to name things out loud.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the reason why I think it needed a whole section, is that because she describes the phenomenon, she describes the experience, what it looks like and what it feels like, and then she puts a name to it. And I also found that to be very helpful. But at a high level, I can see that as kind of a sneaky way of introducing Kanban as a solution. But it also troubled me a little bit that it seems somewhat limiting, because...
Why?
Well, in my mind, Kanban is not fundamentally about efficiency. I think improving efficiency is one of the benefits of Kanban, but Kanban, in my mind, I wouldn't define Kanban as a tool for improving efficiency. That's just one of the benefits of having an effective Kanban system, because it's a lot more than efficiency. Now, she covers some of the other things. She talks about having clarity of purpose, which is important, because if you implement a Kanban system in order to do the wrong thing more efficiently, you're not actually improving your organization. And she talks about systems thinking and company-wide thinking and company-wide systems, and scattered throughout the books are comments, remarks, like if you use this to optimize one team, that doesn't necessarily improve the performance of the system. Or if you're using this to optimize all of your teams, that doesn't necessarily optimize the performance of the system. But unlike the book that we reviewed last month, unlike Klaus's book, which specifically talks about these different levels, Making Work Visible deals mostly with the personal and team level, while alluding to the fact that there are these other dimensions that you should take into consideration, but it never actually tells you how to take them into consideration. And that's why I say I think this is a good book for learning how to introduce Kanban for efficiency at the team level, so with those qualifications.
Okay, now I see your point. So what is your first takeaway?
I had quite a lot of takeaways from this book because I thought this was a clever book. It was delightful to read. I don't think I've had as much fun reading a book for work since I read The Goal, which of course was written as a novel.
Don't tell it to Klaus.
Well, it's a little late. This is a podcast.
I know.
I'm not going to edit my opinions out. Obviously, there's going to be books that are more fun to read, books that are more useful to read. So yes, I will tell Klaus that I think that Dominica's book was a lot of fun to read. And it's because I liked her easy, natural language. It sounds like this... You know what it sounds like? It sounds like this book... I know this can't be true, but it sounds like it was dictated by a person who was in a good mood while she was dictating. It's got a very natural conversational feel to it. There's a lot of cute turns of phrase and a lot of fun metaphors and stories, and so it really feels like I'm just having a chat with Dominica, and I liked that very much. But in terms of takeaways, I don't know where to start. There were so many of them. Here's one that I kind of liked, and that is, she asked the question at the very beginning, if we're overloaded, if we're so busy, why is it that we keep agreeing to take on more work? And this is another one of the things that she does a nice job of itemizing and putting names. So when you're busy and you take on more work, why do you do this? Well, some of the reasons are we're team players. We want to help out. We don't want to let down the team. We're afraid of humiliation. We're afraid of the consequences of saying no, depending on who it is who's asking. We like doing things that are new and shiny. So whatever work we're doing right now is probably less interesting in our mind anyway. Kind of grass is greener on the other side of the fence. So whatever you're asking me to do is probably more interesting than what I'm doing right now. We're terrible at estimating. And so we naturally think that when somebody asks us to do something, that it's going to be easier than it actually turns out to be. And finally, I like this. We just like to please people. She makes a comment someplace else in the book that we get endorphins from saying yes. So when somebody asks you to do a little favor for them, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Can you just have a look at this? Could you help me out with this? Saying yes is like clearing a level on Candy Crush. It's whee! My bird got all the piggies. I get my little endorphin boost. And then once the endorphins are gone, you've got more work.
Yeah. And I think especially most of the time when someone asks me to help, even you, or especially, I don't see the work. I see, the bright outcome, and I already picture myself when I deliver that, and you're smiling and you're happy, and then yes, there's a lot of things to do. But actually, she made a nice comment. I'm not sure if it was at the book or in one of the talks that I reviewed yesterday, but she said that we are terrible at estimation, and especially at estimation of other people's work. That we think that it is like a small little favor to ask, and we are most of the time not aware how big chunk of work is it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And a big chunk of that is that we don't think about all the dependencies involved. We have no concept of context switching and the cost of context switching for ourselves, let alone for another person. So asking for a 5-minute task from somebody who is deep in a state of flow is you've already just ruined their afternoon before they even said yes, which they will because they like the endorphin boost. How about you? One of your takeaways?
Okay, the one we already discussed, which was to expose those 5 time tips. And the second one is to kill your zombie projects. I really loved the way she named it. It got me to thinking, oh my God, I have to kill my zombie project.
What's a zombie project?
The zombie project is a task or a product or something that you have in your backlog, that you have on your to-do list, or it's already in the progress, but you are not going to finish in the next weeks, or it's already on your board for 2 months and you will do it once you have time. For example, you will make this Excel spreadsheet better once you have more time to do it. You will review the podcast maybe and make it better once you have a time, or you will do some...
Not a chance. No editing on this podcast. It goes straight to production.
Yeah, you will do more tests for the new application once you have time. And obviously you won't have more time. You won't have like 2 extra hours to your 24 hours, and you will never ever do it. But it's so hard to say, I'm not capable of that, or like I already put some time into this project, so I have to just keep it for later. Yeah, for sure I will come back to it. Yes, maybe I will keep this option open for more than 2 weeks or something, and luckily the time will come, and it's not coming. So it's better just to kill this project, acknowledge that okay, you put your time and energy into that, but you don't have capacity, or the idea that you had, it's not so brilliant as you thought, so just don't waste your time and use it for something else. And one of the examples that she made, I think it was in her talk that I listened yesterday, was that the team had a big board, and then she had to communicate to them that they have to stop working on something that they already invested 6 months. And then they draw the line and they put the trash can there and, arrow or something that implicated that this work is a trash, that after 6 months it's nothing out of it and they have to just drop it. And for me it would be hard to do because you already invested your personal engagement into that, but for the health of the whole organization, the product, it was the smart decision to kill this zombie project and go on. Because I think very often, especially me, I have a feeling that I already invested my time and that it will be my personal failure if I stop. And it's hard to stop, but once you do it, you feel like, okay, you release energy, you release your time, you don't have it back in your head, holds you back, and you cannot move forward so fast. So yes, I love the idea, I love how she named it, and after I read her book for the second time, I decided to kill it.
Excellent. I hope it wasn't something I asked you to do. Yeah, that's a good point. She also obviously references the sunk cost fallacy.
Exactly.
And I think in that same section she quoted Donald Reinerson explaining that when deciding where to put your efforts, rather than looking at the sum total of the invested time and expense, one should always look at the remaining expense relative to the value. And if you ever find yourself in a position where the remaining expense relative to the value that will be gained is less than something else you can do, that's a zombie project.
Yes.
All right, fabulous. So I had a lot, so let me jump into one of them. A lot of people talk about queuing theory in our world, and they tend to talk about queuing theory as in, this is an idea that comes out of queuing theory, or you should do it because queuing theory.
Nice word.
It's a nice word. It's a field, it's a branch of knowledge, it's a branch of mathematics, and even in all of my production management courses, which I had to take to get an MBA, I don't recall ever actually being taught queuing theory. I've had to do some work on my own to teach myself, but in the actual Agile literature, the instances in which queuing theory shows up are very high, but I've never seen it actually explained except as an explanation in and of itself. Like, you should do this because queuing theory, or Little's Law because from queuing theory. And I think it's a tiny segment. It's like half a page of this book, but there's a bunch of wonderful little treats scattered throughout this book, and I think one of them is the best succinct explanation of queuing theory that I've ever seen, as in a way that's nice and condensed and applicable to our world, with just enough math to make you feel clever.
Yes. Yeah, I love when you say just enough math to make you clever.
So that was one of the things that I think the book is worth reading for. Just one of the many little tidbits that are scattered throughout this book. Do you have another one?
Yes. You can't eliminate unplanned work, but you can make some space when you know that it will happen. So for me, it was kind of eye-opening. I was already trying to, keep some slack for things that I know that will happen, but I was kind of doing this by my intuition. But she brought for me some simple tools that you can use to visualize your unplanned work, to have an explanation when your boss, manager or colleague comes to you and asks why it's not done, because they look at your physical board or electronic board and see that your tasks are not moving, and instead of blaming you that you are lazy, they can see like, look, this is the unplanned work that I had to deal with. Yes, it took me like 50% of my time today. Yeah, I'm not able to finish what I committed to. The other thing that I really like from this part of the book is idea of picturing, visualization of unplanned work on your board, actually, that you can divide your board into two parts in order to build a better understanding of what are you working on. Or, for example, having your sticky notes, and every time someone asks you for a favor, you just write it down on a sticky note, and then at the end of the day, you see how many things you've done, even though that at the beginning of the day, you had no idea that you are going to work on that. And even one step further, at the end of that, you can calculate the percentage of planned and unplanned work that you commit and do every day. And I think that this is a powerful source of knowledge that you can use for all predictability within your team and organization.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So those are two different things, but they're both components of the same thing, which is things that keep you from doing what most people perceive to be your job. Mm-hmm. Unplanned work and interruptions.
Exactly.
And indeed, if you know that, she encourages people to know the ratio of planned work mm-hmm. to unplanned work, so that when you're looking into the future, for example, we've got this concept which I see a lot in large corporations, especially actually in any size corporation, when you've got people who have specialist skills or people who have experience with multiple projects, where they're given instructions that sound logical when you hear them, like I want you to spend half of your time in this and half of your time on this, and even sometimes to the ridiculous extent that I've known people who were like 6% on this project and 12% on this project and 2.5% on this project. And what does that actually mean when all of those numbers add up to 150%? So the idea of knowing what your team or your individual ratio of planned to unplanned work is when you're thinking about the future, if you know that you only spend about 40% of your time on planned work, that means that you have to keep in mind when you're committing to things in the future, mm-hmm. you're only actually talking about 40% of your capacity, because 60% is going to be taken up by things that you don't know about yet. Mm-hmm. But also calling them out so that they're visible allows people to see patterns. So the people who keep poking you for information can see how much those pokes hurt and might mm-hmm. be able to put in place some sort of more simple reporting mechanism. Or they might, if they realize that there are other people who are doing less mission critical work that they could ask for help from. It makes it visible so that people can actually respond to it and find ways to make the whole system more efficient and to interrupt people less and let them focus on what their core work is.
One of the things that made me terrified in this part of the book is that Dominica, she used research that was made in 2016, if I'm correct, that said that high-performance team spend only 28% of their time on the planned work. Yes. I'm just looking right now on one of the sticky notes that is just, saying 28%. And I know that this is responding to that research that she brought up in the book. And I think terrifying number.
But, that brings me to one of the things that she stressed in this book, which is that she talks a lot about efficiency, but being efficient at doing the wrong things doesn't benefit the organization at all. So I appreciate the fact that she dedicated a fair amount of the book to talking about vision and prioritization. So I think that one of the ways she put it is that a team can come together when they're talking about their day, when they're talking about their work, when they're talking about their plans. They should be discussing the where and the how and the who and the what, but they shouldn't have to discuss why. That there's a lot of power for an organization in having a really clear understanding of what the purpose of that mm-hmm. organization is, because it allows senior management to prioritize and to make decisions. But also having some clear prioritization scheme allows teams and individuals throughout the organization to make the best judgment calls, because when there's always going to be more work to do than there is capacity. There always will be. And I think one of the things that becomes very problematic for teams, and one of the things that keeps organizations from being as efficient as possible, is that when there's unclear priorities, when there's unclear goals, you have a lot of people who are doing something who assume that anything that their boss asks them to do is more important than what they were planning on doing, for example, because the boss is the keeper of this truth, which is priorities. When the truth of the matter is, a lot of middle managers are just passing things along to get them off their desk. If they actually had a clear visualization of the impact of their requests. I'll give you an example. Obviously, recruitment is important for an IT organization. Turnover is very painful. most IT organizations are in a state of more or less constant growth. And so people are frequently, a big chunk of a lot of IT workers' jobs is participating in the recruitment process, which is never planned work. So it's not uncommon at all for senior engineers to have their boss say, "Can you sit in on this interview this afternoon with this candidate and let me know what you think of her?" And that happens even when there's a crisis on the team, or there's some important piece of work that engineer is a specialist in, or there's a deployment happening, or what have you. And there are many people who can sit in on an interview. Interviews can even be rescheduled. There's all sorts of other ways to deal with that sort of request, or even down to the more silly ones, like, I think I might have a virus on my computer, could you have a look at it? The number of times that senior engineers whose job it is to create functionality that drive value for the business have to fix problems on an individual workstation, or teach their boss how to use some software tool, is, if that could be eliminated from industry, it would dramatically improve the performance of companies around the world. So I'm rambling. I can tell from your face that I'm rambling. So I really liked the idea that when there's a very clear-cut set of prioritization, even if it's just something as simple as first in, first out, if there is a system-wide understanding that first in, first out is the way in which we do prioritization, it might not be the most efficient one, but one thing that it clearly communicates, when your boss comes up and says, "Can you do this thing for me?" and you say yes, everyone knows it's at the bottom of the list. You're not going to stop whatever you're doing right now to do that thing because it's not the first in. If that your prioritizations are based on customer value, then you can ask questions about what's the customer value of this request, and then you can prioritize it appropriately. And if your boss comes back to you the next day and says, "Have you done this thing?" you can say, "No, I've been doing this and this thing, both of which we can agree higher customer value." And your boss can say, yes, you're right. You're prioritizing appropriately. So I really enjoyed the way in which she discussed prioritization mechanisms and ways of setting the vision in such a way that everybody in the organization can make the best choices about how to use their limited time.
I'm happy that you brought it up, because it was one of my takeaways too, about conflicting priorities and also how to prioritize. But one of the things that I would add to this point is, like she said, once you have WIP limits, it's like a perfect excuse to say no to your boss. Because you can just use your visualization to show them that, okay, I can do it, but you have to be aware of the cost. So it's like basically something that you just described right now.
Which you can only do if you're also tracking unplanned work.
Exactly. So I would encourage everyone to invest their time and energy into work visualization, because it can really help you with communicating your problems, showing your team what are you working on and why you can't help. Okay, so my takeaway, actually it's from the beginning of the book. I think it's even introduction, which means that it was a really good book if the first takeaway is taken from the introduction. She described this culture of being busy, that everyone wants to be busy. It's kind of like, trendy. It shows that you're sometimes maybe like your status. But on the other hand, it's kind of illness, because if you are busy all the time, it means that you are working on multiple things and you have no idea what is your top priority, or you have no time to think about any improvements in your team. So yes, that was something that really got into my head at the end of the takeaway. It was a short one. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think I might even mentioned this during the podcast two podcasts ago in the first episode. But one of my measures of determining when, as a coach, the team doesn't need me anymore is when they do that most difficult of things, and that's recognizing that not just the value, but the essential nature of having slack in a system that has variability. And the way you see it, because it's so painful to a person. Nobody likes going to work and being at the office and not being seen to be busy with value-adding work. That's a very uncomfortable thing for a person to do. And yet, as I often will put it, if the goal is to get work done, so we're a group of people who collectively are trying to get work done, then it should follow naturally that a person with nothing to do is not as bad as work ready to be done with no one to do it. And those two things are in direct conflict. If everyone's busy, then you know that there's a pile of work that's ready to be worked on and no one to do the work. I think I'll jump about it a little bit because one of my favorite quotations, because this is one of the segments of the podcast, is our favorite quotes. One of my quotes is that we don't let our servers get to 100% capacity utilization, so let's not do that to ourselves.
Exactly.
Because we don't have buffers. Or we do have buffers, but buffers are very inefficient and involve context switching and are the major source of increasing the cycle time, which is what we're trying to reduce in order to deliver value faster. So a fabulous way of knowing at a glance whether or not a system or organization, a group of people, is as effective as they could be, is if they're all busy, then they're not. They're not as effective as they could be. Which is why when I left my last engagement after a year and a half, one of the reasons why I felt comfortable leaving is I was working with teams who were finally at a point where they would, during their daily stand-up, rather than that typical behavior of I'm working on X, next I'll do Y, I'm working on X, next I'll do Y. Each person is working on one important thing and next they're going to do another important thing. People started saying things like, I'm working on X and next I'm going to do Y. And the next person will say, I've never done Y before and I want to learn, so I'm going to wait and then I'm going to help her with Y. And then the next person might say, I'm finishing up Z, but instead of starting something else, I can see that X is almost going to be finished, so I'm going to be ready to take it when it's done, so we can get that thing through to production as quickly as possible. When people start saying things like that, I'm going to pair with this person so I can learn and be available to take on any emergencies or any new things that come up, or I'm going to wait for a piece of work that I know is coming down the pipe very quickly and is more important than whatever I might do next. When I start seeing people doing that, it's a sign of an incredibly high level of maturity in their adoption of flow thinking values, of systems thinking behavior. So I like the fact that she draws that out and calls attention to it so effectively in this book.
I have one more benefit of reading the book. I would recommend it also for everyone who doesn't know how to deal with dependencies. Actually, she uses a few tools that you can use to expose them, to make sure that your team understands the cost of those dependencies, to make sure that they are aware of that and know how. That was my one more take.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing, is that it's obvious that this woman is a very experienced practitioner. Mm-hmm. Dominica DeGrandis is not a coach who helicopters into organizations. She has done this work.
Yeah, and who says it depends? Okay, maybe she says it depends, but then she can actually say depends on what and adjust the solution for you that might work out.
So without giving away too much of the delightful elements in this book, one of the things that this book is absolutely littered with is smells. What we tend to refer to as smells, which is some indication that all is not quite right here.
Okay.
And there are things that you can expect to see in an organization. So for example, if work is busy, if people are busy, then work is being neglected. So if you walk into a room and everyone's busy, work is being neglected. Another one that I really liked is if you ever see the local pizza delivery guy show up and deliver more than 2 pizzas to a room, then you probably have excessive coordination overhead. Mm-hmm. In that room, there's more people and more teams trying to collaborate than is really efficient. Mm-hmm. And so just little things like that. If the pizza guy's holding more than 2 pizzas, you should be looking out for this sort of thing. Is something that I don't usually see in books of this nature, and it's just because she is a highly experienced operations manager who has been in the thick of it for most of her career.
I have also one more to add. I really like her example with being on time for a dinner with like your brother and friend at 6 p.m. when she pictured how little chance there is that you all will be on time. And actually it really addressed my pain, because whenever someone asks me how long it will take, of course I put it lower. I think that it will be faster. But right now, having this example in my head, it shows me, actually the chance is for sure very little, small one, that there's more chances that it will go wrong, that we won't be on time in any scenario.
What was that, from that section, she quoted Troy McGinnis, and I think he said something like, every dependency you add doubles the chance of failure?
Yes.
Okay, that's not exactly it, but...
something like that.
but the idea is that if a successful delivery is binary, it's either on time or it's not on time, every single dependency is one more thing that is either going to be on time or not on time. And if any one dependency being not on time leads to the entire feature, the entire product, the entire unit of work being not on time, that means every single dependency halves the chances of delivering on time. Although that's not literally true, because it's not binary. There's a probability here. Some things are more likely to be late than other things are to be late. So it's a simplistic way of thinking about it, which is why I like the way that I heard it expressed, which is that external dependencies randomize lead time. If you've got a number of dependencies, you don't know what the probabilities of delivery on time for any of those dependencies are. Effectively what happens is your lead time is randomized.
Yeah.
Both are alarming. I saw a tweet this morning. I wish I could remember who tweeted it. It was something to the effect of, if you have X components that have to happen on time, and I forget what X was, but it wasn't a huge number, and they all have a 99% guarantee. Something like if you have 20 dependencies that have to happen and they all have a 99% guarantee, there's only a 12.5% chance of success. Those sorts of it's just math. It's just math, but one rarely looks at it that way. Like, they're almost always on time, and they're almost always on time, and they're almost always on time, and we're dependent on these three groups that are almost always on time, so we will almost certainly be fine. Is the kind of rationalization that the non-mathematical brain makes so easily, because we can envision success so much more easily than we can do the math.
Exactly. And we think that we base it on facts,
Yes.
Okay, my favorite quotation. Yes, because I didn't have a chance yet to say that. So, busyness can be an addiction for terminally wired, ambitious people. The end. Indeed.
And isn't that so, it's ironic, because busyness and there's a negative correlation between busyness and accomplishment, or busyness and achievement. If you're always busy, you're not developing yourself. You are the product of your actual activities, your outcome. People aren't judged. When there are two people up for a promotion, and one of them works long hours, is always the first one in and the last one out, and is really helpful, and everybody likes her because she always says yes to everything, but she hasn't really accomplished that much of her own job. She hasn't had any successes. She's not going to get fired because everybody loves her, but she's probably not going to get promoted either over that person who respects their own time, has a clear set of priorities that are in line with the company's values, and has delivered on those two major engagements that had to be done last year. So yeah, busyness and ambition go hand in hand, but they're not complementary.
I'm sorry, I just pictured of what you said, and I pictured this woman who's like trying and doing everything, and then at the end, yeah, okay, sorry. That's the reason why my face got in that. I understand your point.
You had a rough week last week.
Yes.
I think you're seeing a little bit of yourself in that, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Luckily, listeners cannot see my face right now.
I had one other one, and I want to share this. I said at the beginning, when we were talking, that one of the things I like about this book is the playful language, which makes it so fun to read. Here's just an example. It doesn't even have anything to do with making work visible, and it doesn't have anything to do with Kanban. But when she was describing the process of merging two source code branches, and making them compile and run, here's an exact quote. She said, "It's kind of like adopting an older cat and praying that he and your current much older cat will embrace each other with open paws."
Yes, it made me laugh too.
I laughed many times throughout this book just because of the language and the way she talks about these time thieves as though they were real people who took some kind of perverse pleasure in messing up our grand plans.
Yes. Okay, so what is your recommendation for the next fun and smart book to read?
Goodness, I've got
No pressure.
No pressure. Okay, I've got a few.
Okay.
Some of the things I was thinking about is we could go deep. We've had one book that was about introducing Kanban flight levels to an organization in order to improve the way the organization delivers value at multiple levels. We've read this book, which is a great book about how to. It can be applied at any level, but it's largely focused on improving the efficiency of teams by using Kanban practices and values. So I was thinking we could keep it kind of high level, and look at something like Rolling Rocks Downhill by Clark Cheng, which is I've heard is a fabulous, fun book that I have not read yet. And feel
Yes,
like
it's a fun book. I was reading it in Portugal last year.
Okay.
So good memories. I can refresh it.
I was also thinking we might do a deep dive into something that I think is really interesting, which is Actionable Agile Metrics by Daniel Vacanti. We could just go hardcore on the math.
Yeah.
Or our friend Mark Loeffler recently wrote a book on his topic, his thing, which is improving retrospectives. Not only making them more interesting, but making them more valuable. And I'm ashamed to say it. Mark, I'm so sorry. If you're listening to this, I have...
Put thumbs down.
I have bought several copies of your book. I have put them in company libraries, but I haven't actually read it yet.
Shame.
I know. I should read every friend's book, and that's part of the reason we started this podcast. I would finally read my friends' books, but I haven't read Improving Agile Retrospective. So do we do a deep dive into math? Do we tackle an issue which is relevant to everyone, which is making your retrospectives more effective and enjoyable? Or would you recommend that I next read Rolling Rocks Downhill?
It would be fun if you would read Rolling Rocks Downhill, because you will be...
Can you say it 3 times?
Because you will be probably in Portugal at that time, and you will have a similar experience as I had. Sorry. But on the other hand, I think that I would like to have a call with Mark, because I met him 3 years ago at ACE, and since then I didn't talk with him at all. So if I can be biased, I would go for Mark book or Rolling Rocks Downhill.
Okay, so the holiday season is upon us, or the holiday taking season is upon us.
Math.
Not to give away too much of my security here, but over the course of between now and the next podcast, I'm going to be in Spain. We're both going to be in Austria, and probably when we record this podcast, I'm going to be in Portugal, and I'm still going to be in Portugal when we record the interview. If Mark agrees to do an interview with us, which I hope he will, those will both be done from Portugal. So I think that since we're going to be recording this remotely, it might not be such a good idea to get into something that's as complex and sensitive as metrics. I'd like to talk with you, record that podcast with you face to face when we can be in a room together.
I need to see your face when I say something stupid. Yes.
Well, we'll need a whiteboard.
Definitely.
There might be some spreadsheets involved.
Yes.
So in that case, the next podcast will be an interview with the author, Dominica DeGrandis, and next month's podcast is going to be our review of Mark Loeffler's book, Improving Agile Retrospectives. That's a wrap of another episode of the Agile Book Club podcast with Justina Pindell and Paul Klipp. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/agilebookclub. Send your comments or feedback to comments@agilebook.club, and we may discuss them in the show.